I went to Bluesfest on
Yeah, how was
Friday.
that?
Well, that was weird. I honestly felt strange being in that many because it was fairly well attended. I actually was expecting. I mean, Bluesfest is a fairly relaxed festival as it is. Like it's not like a Splendor or whatever. It's just like crammed. Like generally, it's family friendly and you can move around.
So,
And
for people who don't know what you're talking about, we're talking about the Byron Bay Blues Festival, which
Byron
is
Bay Blues Festival.
a blues and roots, but not just really blues and roots music. Like, I mean,
They've widened the categories a fair bit. I would say there's like hip hop there. There's like a whole bunch of kind of.
But it is a much more family friendly pitched festival than those sort of big rock and pop festivals. And it's
famously the festival where the Counting Crows came one year and refused to play Mr. Jones, which people still talk about to this day. I heard a few people mention it's the most memorable gig for the wrong reasons that ever played Bluesfest.
Yeah, well, this is the story of Bluesfest. Bluesfest has been cancelled the last 2 years in the week that it was going to happen. So it's an independently produced festival, one of the few in Australia. And literally they had built the festival site both years, like outlaid so many of the costs, advertising and all those sort of things, only for it to be cancelled at the very last moment. So the fact that it is gone
last
ahead.
Year they cancelled it off the back of one positive COVID case.
Right. Which turned out to not turn into many more than that, which
adorable when you think about it. If it wasn't for the fact that so many people lost thousands, if not millions of dollars.
I mean, it was an absolute tragedy for the community, and yet still only second and third behind the Counting Crows not playing Mr. Jones.
So it was actually pretty well attended, and I think obviously people are just so desperate for something. Like there was a whole mix, young people who I wouldn't expect to see at Bluesfest there, and like kids, teenage boys and girls just desperate to get nude, like just shirtless guys. It was fairly chilly on Friday night, like 16 degrees, but the dudes were still shirtless and the girls are still running around in their bra tops. It's like, you were determined to have a festival experience regardless, whatever the lineup was going to be, whatever the weather conditions were going to be. It's like you got your pasties, you're ready just to go and have a festival experience, which, by the way, have you noticed, and this is going to make us sound old for the millionth time on the show, but the 90s are so back, like in terms of fashion. Like there are young people like in their late teens, early 20s who I swear to God, I'm like having flashbacks. It's like, you look like the guys I went to uni with. Like there was a girl the other day who looked like she was out of the Matrix. Like the way she had her hair braided and the little glasses and she was wearing a mesh top. It was like the most 90s goth, like industrial techno look I've ever seen. It's like, it's back, baby. I mean, does that mean we're hip again? Because that was our era, the 90s?
Well, I was just thinking that. And I was kind of thinking in my timeline, is there a chance that I could be like recaptured as sort of like a 90s icon, like, ironically recaptured by the next generation. And
like a David Hasselhoff kind of thing,
I think unfortunately I'm more early 2000s because I started Triple J in 2000 and then like Glasshouse comes after that. So if there's ever going to be some sort of like Will Anderson nostalgia,
you and Sum 41 get on the same bill.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely going to be early 2000s. So I've got to wait for the early 2000s to become cool again. But yes, our fashion and our taste in things is very much back.
Yeah, it's very much back. And so, because the lineup this year for Blues obviously is 100%, or I'm pretty sure 100% Australian. Obviously, they just didn't want to take the risk of booking international gigs. So Friday night was like...
And we say 100% Australian, and we mean that because Crowded House played, and they are 100% Australian, as we've always said in Australia.
We've always said. But Friday night was like my teens all over again because the two headline acts were Hoodoo Gurus and Midnight Oil.
Yeah.
And I think we've done many episodes on the Hoodoo Gurus. Like we both.
But how were they? Gurus. Like, how did they play?
Fantastic. Like really, really good. A friend of mine knows them, and she said afterwards that they were a bit like deflated. They didn't think they'd had a very good gig. They weren't happy with the sound mix and stuff. But I thought they sounded great. Like they've just got so many hits. Like that's the thing about the Hoodoo Gurus. But seeing them now too, like the last time I saw them was when you did that, you did a benefit for the Bondi Pavilion.
It was a Bondi Pavilion benefit in the Hoodoo Gurus play.
Yeah, they did a very casual kind of like 5 songs. This was a proper like 1 hour show, and I was with our mate VK, and we were both saying like, if you closed your eyes, like they are just the most like the biggest party band, and they just sound like so rock and roll, and they're so great. But then you open your eyes and you look at them, and it's just, they look like a bunch of accountants. Like, especially Dave. Like, Vaughn kept saying, I didn't realize Flacco played rock and roll. Like, yeah, he's got a real Flacco vibe about him. Like, they sound so rock. And then we were sort of like going, I said, but what genre do they fit in? Are they kind of like surf rock? Are they psychedelic rock? Because they sort of drift in and out of all these different genres. But they were playing some new music, and the difference between the old tracks, like the songs you knew, and then the new tracks was like very stark. Like there was just something, I mean, it wasn't just the familiarity, that it just sounded different. Like it didn't have that kind of Hoodoo Gurus energy. It felt like maybe a band, you know, doing a version of the Hoodoo Gurus, but they were still great. If I'd seen them in isolation, I would have been like, well, that was an amazing gig, and what an icon. But then they were followed by Midnight Oil, who I haven't seen. I saw them at the fire benefit in 2008, and I was like, well, thank God that no one will ever have to raise money for natural disasters in Australia.
Yeah, once in a lifetime.
We solved it. Climate change is solved. And then prior to that, I remember seeing them on it was probably the Blue Sky Mine tour in like 91, 92 when I was like 13. My brother got me tickets to see them. So I was like, oh yeah, Midnight Oil. This is, I wanted to see them more as a legacy kind of piece than like any kind of, but holy fuck. Honestly, that was one of the best like performances I have ever seen of any band, anytime, anywhere. Like they were incredible. Like it was a 2-hour show, and every element from like the band sounded amazing. Peter Garrett's voice still sounds incredible. Like just the range and the power in it. But the actual way the show was designed and the lighting and the graphics, it was just like I could compare it to was the only time I've ever seen Radiohead. I remember it was probably like 2012, 2013 when I saw Radiohead, and it wasn't just about the music. Like you were just in this experience where it's like an art show in some cases, like just the lighting changes and the way they would drift in and out of songs, and it just had this kind of intensity to it. Like, and Peter Garrett too. Like you sort of forget, like it became such a cliche after a while to make fun of Peter Garrett, the way he dances and all that kind of stuff. But then you actually see it and you're like, this is incredible. Like you cannot take your eyes off him. He's just so magnetic, and you just don't know what he's going to do next. Or you sort of do know what he's going to do next, but you just can't believe that he's doing it. And the whole thing, like that whole crowd, like festival gigs can be so hard because you've got people spilling in from other, they're there to see other bands, whatever. They're not there just to see Midnight Oil, but they had everyone, and they were eating out of the palm of their hand. And even Jem, who sort of, she was aware of Midnight Oil, but didn't grow up here, so she didn't have that kind of parochial. But she was like, that was one of the greatest concerts I've ever seen. And she's like, they're so hardcore. And it's like, yeah, man. Like at some stages, it was like a punk show. Like he was just fucking angry and out there and just riling the crowd up. And everyone was just like, I think there was a lot of pent up kind of like aggression just from, 2 years of not being able to go for festivals, plus all the fucking shit that everyone's been through in the last few years. And it was just great. It was just this real release. But I tell you what, Will, if you want a funny...
Can I just, before you go on to your funny thing. So I saw Midnight Oil about 3 years ago, whenever that last tour they did before this one was.
2018, I think it was.
Yeah. So I saw them at the Sydney Myer Music Bowl in Melbourne, and they were incredible. I've been very lucky to see them a lot over my lifetime. And from before I was even involved in the music industry in any way, like even through radio or anything, they just used to tour Canberra a lot when I was at university. So I saw them a bunch when they were like, they would do their big show, but they'd then play at like the ANU Uni Bar and stuff like that. So it was like, they were one of the real formative bands of like when I was getting into music. But the thing that I've always found incredible about them, and I think that Cold Chisel are a bit like this, they're not exactly the same, but they're very smart bands that have this mass appeal to people who don't necessarily engage just with how smart they are. Like, and that is the great appeal. Like you can just love Midnight Oil, or you could just love Cold Chisel for the music without thinking too much about what the stories are about and what the meaning behind it is about and those sort of things. In fact, Yeah, they're one of those hilarious bands like Rage Against the Machine where occasionally somebody's like, well, why are you making it so political? And you're like, well, because the 30 years of them making music has all been absolutely political. What did you think Blue Sky Mine was about, dude? Like, this has literally been all they've ever done. But because the actual performance is that of a tradition, well, not traditional, but like it looks like a rock and roll show and a rock and roll band, and you have a charismatic front person who is as charismatic as Mick Jagger or somebody like that in the way that he controls the stage, then you forget that they are an overtly political band, despite the fact that they wear the fact that they're an overtly political band very proudly.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I was thinking about that, watching him dance on stage, and it's such a distinct, the way he moves and stalks the stage, and I was like, how many lead singers are there that are so unique that you can impersonate them just physically? Like, yeah, you're right, Mick Jagger, you can do that sort of duck walk that Mick Jagger does. Maybe you could do like a Liam Gallagher if you just put your arms behind your back, and or Lemmy, you put the microphone up there. But there's only one Peter Garrett. Like as soon as someone starts doing that off timing click, at the front and the side, like it's Peter Garrett. And yes, that thing about the political, I was annoying the people I was with because every 5 minutes I'd turn around and go, look, I love the songs, but when do they get so political? After like the fifth or sixth time, people are like, we get it, Charlie.
We get the joke.
Funny. But I did wonder if there were people in the crowd who, like you say, were like, yeah, they're just here because the rock element of it was so good, and they would do these kind of, and it was so melodic as well. Like they're such great musicians that it's really heavy music, but you could hear every part of it. And we were standing right next to the mixing desk, and I was looking at the engineer, and he was about 70, and I reckon this guy must be their permanent sound engineer, because he knew the band so well that it was just calibrated perfectly, where you could hear every individual instrument, but also it was balanced in a way that you got this wall of sound washing over you that was just, it's hard to describe it. There's just those gigs you go to where you just like, after even the opening, which was like a fairly low key, moody opening where they sung one of their new songs, We Resist, and it was just them in silhouette and stuff. But by the end of it, you were like, fuck yeah, let's tear down the system. Like it's just, they had that Rage Against the Machine kind of element where they, even if you weren't listening to the lyrics, it's just something about it makes like fires you up and gets you really like angry. And it was beautiful at one point because, believe it or not, Will, Peter Garrett had some things to say about the state of the world and the state of politics.
How does he think we're going?
Not good. He reduced ScoMo to he who shall not be named. Like he actually said that I'm not going to grant him the dignity of even using his name. But at one point,
is there any chance he was talking about Voldemort and you've just misunderstood?
Yeah, well, the podcast Mark could tell us he was going on and on about he shall not be named. But he did this great little he tricked the audience because he was getting them more and more fired up by this laundry list of, things that, the current government has fucked up, and, the way they've been awarding welfare and stuff, and, favoring certain seats to other seats. And he's been doing this and that. And then he started going on about cognitive bias. And he's like, that's when you just accept information. So you've got climate scientists, saying this, and this is the data, and this is a fact. It's, incontrovertible. But then you've got people with cognitive bias who are just refusing to do that and giving money to mining companies. And the crowd's like, fuck yeah, fuck ScoMo, fuck Mo. And he's gone, it's just like the anti-vaxxers and Mullumbimby.
Yeah.
And then you just the audience go, wait, fuck, no, that's us. Shit.
Yes.
It was brilliant. It was so good. It was so good the way he got it in there. And then you sort of had you saw the fist up, then the fist sort of came down again. And it's like, oh no, what do we do? He's making a good point, but he's also making a point about us. To see the full video, join our Patreon.
Patreon.com/TOFOP.